It's the Germany Experience, the podcast about life in Germany as seen through the eyes of outsiders. I'm your host, Sean, and welcome to the show. You can visit the website at thegermanyexperience.de. You can also send me messages there by going to thegermanyexperience.de/contact, or you can just send me an email at info@thegermanyexperience.de. So many opportunities and possibilities to get in touch with me. Just get in touch. This week, there is no guest on the podcast. In fact, I'm going to be doing a Q&A. So the guest, you could say, is me. I'm the guest and I'm the host. So, well, technically, my listeners and social media followers are kind of the hosts, because what we're doing for this Q&A session is I asked you for your questions, and I got a lot of great questions that I'm going to be trying to answer in this episode. But before we get into that, I want to read a 5-star review that I got. I can't remember if I've read it on the podcast before or not, but I got this back at the end of September. I was on a bit of a break with the podcast back then, so I don't think that I read this. And I like to read the reviews. And as you know, if you listen to the show, I also read the bad ones. So it's all fine. A review is a review. You know what I'm saying? This one, however, is a good one. 5 stars by someone named Sweetentart. And they write, great prep for my move next year. I've been listening for a few months now, working my way through your catalog. I was admitted to my master's degree in Germany this year, but deferred 1 year due to the pandemic. Listening to this show both helps me know what to expect and to prepare for my move, as well as keeps me excited while I wait to begin my own Germany experience. Thanks, and keep the episodes coming. Well, that's what I'm doing, Sweetentart. I am keeping the episodes coming, and this one that is coming right now is happening right now. So, as I said, for this Q&A, I've taken questions that I got from listeners in emails or that you sent me on Instagram, where I posted asking for your questions. And I also got one from Facebook. And before I start, I just want to say my apologies if I don't get to your questions, because there were a lot of them. And there are also 1 or 2 questions that I got that I'm saving for future episodes that I'm doing. The first one, I'm going to start off with the one from the Facebook group, the Germany Experience Facebook group on Facebook, obvos. You can do a search for it and find it there on Facebook, and the link is also in the show notes, of course. The user that wrote it, Marcus Kessler, he wrote, how much have your shopping habits changed? From how often do you go shopping? What do you purchase? What kind of stores do you go to? And have you gotten proficient at speed bagging and lane sniping for new registers? Well, Marcus, it's interesting that you told that. I've been in Germany for so long now that I think I've forgotten how much of a change it was. What I do know is that the speed, like you say, the speed was such a big thing when we got here. My wife and I's first trip to the supermarket was just one of shock and awe, let's put it that way, where we were like, oh my God, is this what we're dealing with? And I seem to remember I was thinking maybe we should try another supermarket because this one's super weird. And the next one was exactly the same. It's just supermarket culture here in Germany. So our habits changed in that, first of all, in South Africa, we have people bagging our bags. We didn't have that here in Germany. And that also felt pretty strange. It now feels strange, by the way, when I go back to South Africa and there are bag packers there. I just want to pack my own bags now, kind of thing. So that has changed quite a lot for me. And like you said, the speed bagging, what I haven't quite gotten used to is the new line for new registers. Like when they open a new cash register and there's a mad rush from everyone. It's not orderly. It's just kind of survival of the fittest, who can get to that new supermarket queue the quickest. And something I haven't done, because I'm usually, when they open a new supermarket queue, I'm just like, I don't really need that drama in my life. So I'm just going to stay where I am in the queue that I've chosen, even if it's going to take longer than the new queue that's just opened up. So that is something that I haven't adjusted to. Marcus gave his own answer to the question. He wrote, I found myself with a weird mix of shopping every few days for the fresh things and meals for the next few days. That's true as well. When I was in South Africa, or when we were in South Africa, we used to do shopping for a longer time period for some reason. We would do one big shop for maybe a few weeks. Whereas here in Germany, it's more like a regular big grocery shopping thing that we do. And also doing large bulk shopping to get that carton of 10 milk containers to put in the basement because it's 15 cents cheaper this week. Marcus, who has also just recently got to Germany, you're becoming pretty Germanized pretty quickly there. So that was from the Facebook group. Now, on Instagram, this is where the rest of the questions come from. And some of these people asked more than one question. So, yeah, as I said, if I don't get to all the questions, then my apologies. But this one is from someone named Lilo_HLT06. What's your favorite German word? And this is when I often think about, I don't know, like I don't generally have a favorite word, but every now and then I discover words that I love to use in German. And the one that you could say is my hot word at the moment, the word that I love, it's colloquial. I use it in the colloquial meaning, but it does have a real German meaning, and it's the word schmarren. Schmarrn. I even love the way it's spelled. It's fantastic. Schmarren. The original meaning is it's a kind of a meal. It's a dish or chopped, according to Wiktionary, it's a dish of chopped or shredded baked goods, especially Kaiserschmarren, which is basically shredded pancake dessert. So this is the word, but the way that the Germans use it is to talk about something that's rubbish or nonsense, as if I would say, you're talking nonsense. I would say, was für ein Schmarren. And I love this word so much that I use it in almost every meeting that I can. That's in German at work. I was like, was für ein Schmarren. Das ist ein Schmarren. Yeah, that's my favorite word at the moment. I don't know. It changes. I'd also love to hear your favorite words, by the way. What are your favorite words? Write to me at info@thegermanexperience.de and tell me some of your favorite German words. Lilo_HTL06 also wrote, what do you appreciate most in Germany? Rob Enner, who I know is also from South Africa, also asked, what do you love most about Germany? And what I've said it in an interview before, I've said it in several interviews that I've been a guest on, is that I love the security here in Germany. It's just, I was just back in South Africa the other day and I observed how careful everyone there is still and how life in South Africa is dictated by staying safe because there's such a lot of crime, such a lot of danger that you could be the victim of crime. That everyone's very, very cautious and paranoid, and life is dictated by staying safe. That's one of your main goals, and that's something that I don't really experience in Germany. I still have some of my paranoia from South African days, but in general, the sense of security here is one of the big reasons why we chose to move to Germany. And it's something that I will never take for granted. There's this feeling of security that we have here. And yeah, just the sense of it's a good place to raise kids. So that is the thing that I love most about Germany. Now, another Instagram follower, SS Comstock, don't know how I'm saying that. How long before you started to call or think of Germany as home instead of South Africa? And another similar question was asked by The Adventures of Steffi, previous guest on the show, by the way. Was there a point or a moment where you realized, yeah, Germany is the place for me? So it's hard to think back now from where I am now and find a specific point where I had that feeling. And I think it's made more difficult because even in the beginning when things were really tough and the integration was causing us a lot of frustration for my wife and I don't think there was ever a time where it was a possibility that would we go back to South Africa. I can't remember thinking that at any point. It was just kind of, we liked Germany enough. We'd seen enough good things in Germany for it to convince us that was where we wanted to be. So there wasn't ever a case of a long time where I felt like South Africa was home and Germany wasn't. But I think the closest that I came to feeling like home was in Germany was a trip that we made, and not even back to South Africa, but rather to the United States of America. We went to go visit some family that we have over there. And we'd been in Germany for 5 years at that point, and we had a son who was 2 years old. And I remember coming back to Germany and feeling, man, it's good to be home. And realizing, whoa, what? I just felt like it was good to be coming home, and that place just happened to be Germany. So at some point, I think it kind of just gradually happened that I felt more and more like Germany was home. Didn't mean that I still wasn't having integration issues or difficulties with the language, but at some point I just felt like this is home. This is where I feel home. And I think a lot of it also has to do with when you have kids in Germany. And I don't mean bringing kids to Germany. I mean, when you have kids here in Germany, I guess it creates more of a connection in some way when you have a kid here that makes it feel like this is home. Well, at least for me. I can't answer for other people, at least for me. Now, another Instagram follower, Alyssa.savs, asked me a lot of questions. So I won't get to all of Alyssa's questions, but I'm going to try answer some of them. So the first one that she asked was favorite German movie or TV show. So I'll be honest, I haven't watched many German movies or TV shows. And the few that I did watch, I've spoken about on the podcast before or will speak in the near future. But my favorite German TV show by far is the TV show called Dark that came out over the last few years. Obviously, it's bizarre that it has an English name, but it's completely German series. And the writing on that show is phenomenal. It's one of the TV shows that I felt didn't write itself into a corner like so many TV shows could do over a number of seasons. They also decided to keep it short, like tell the story within 3 seasons and then stop, which I think is always a good idea with story-driven TV shows, because then you don't run the chance of overwriting or trying to better yourself every season. So it's like 3 really good seasons, and they finished the story off very nicely. It was still very confusing. It's a damn confusing TV show, and not just because of the German, just because it's confusing and a lot of storylines and things going on for you to understand. After the ending, there was still room to debate about what it all meant, but it was mostly completed and it felt satisfying. So it was, I loved it. I just loved it. There were some downsides to it though. So don't take this recommendation without listening to the cons of this, because it might also not be for everyone. And the one downside is it's incredibly serious. It's such a serious TV show, and it takes itself extremely seriously. So the mood can get pretty grim, and yeah, it's not always an easy watch. And also the main character I found was so slow to react. Like he doesn't do much in scenes. He just stands there and people say things, and sometimes you just want him to react. And there were times where I felt like screaming at the screen going, just say something, just react to what's going on. But even with those downsides, still a great TV show, and I highly, highly recommend it because it's a great science fiction TV show. One of the best that I've seen, actually. So there you go. Alyssa also asked, do you follow any German sports? And Expatcast. We got some more questions coming up from Expatcast a little later on. She asked, which German football team do you support? So I don't follow football that much anymore, so I don't really have any team affiliates. And when I first got to Germany, I went to watch a few Eintracht Frankfurt matches in the stadium, because I think I was more interested in football back then. But otherwise, I just don't follow the Bundesliga. I watch when there's big tournaments like European Meisterschaft or the World Cup. But generally, I just mainly the sports that I follow are rugby and American football, and those aren't very German. So yeah, not very German on the sports side of things. Sounding Lustig asked, a great question, I must say. And if you don't follow her on Instagram, you have this very funny Instagram account, Sounding Lustig. She asked, what was the bitchiest, most German person you have ever met, and what happened? Well, Sounding Lustig, I knew exactly who to talk about when I read this question, because when I was working, it was quite a way into my German experience, if you want to put my German life, if you want to put it that way. And where I worked in Nuremberg, next door to the offices is a bakery. And there was this woman in that bakery that basically became my nemesis over time, and she detested me. It was just the way it is. She hated me. And I think it was because it started off really badly. The first time that I went into the bakery, there was some baked goods on the top of the shelf. And there was a sign there saying that you should ask for service at the counter. But I mean, I saw these things and they looked really great. So I grabbed one, and she freaked out about that. She was with another customer, like 2 people down. She saw me grabbing this thing, picking it up, and she freaked out and she yelled at me in the store. And I tried to defend myself. And the thing is, I don't know if you found when you're learning German and then you try and answer in German in a stress situation where someone is attacking you like this, it's difficult to form competent sentences or to put forward a good argument in that situation. So I came across as really like dumb, just couldn't say anything back. But it did not prevent her from laying into me. And then even when I got to her and I paid for it, I tried to explain what was going on, and she was still not having none of it. And that was just the first visit. That was the first visit. There was more of these kinds of interactions. I think that one of the, I don't know if it was the next one or a few ones later, where I wanted to pay for some or other baked goods. And instead of putting the money down in that little money plate that they have at bakeries, I happened to give it to her directly in her hands, not thinking. This was pre-corona, by the way. So, I mean, nowadays I wouldn't do that. I would put the money down if I'm even paying with money at all. And she freaked out because I didn't put the money down in the right place. And there were a series of these kinds of events. Every time I would go to the bakery, there would be some kind of thing that would happen where she would just freak out at me. So it got to the point where I was sending my colleagues to go and buy my lunch from the bakery lady. But I think that even my colleagues got a bit nervous in case she realized that they were representing me somehow, and they wanted nothing. They wanted to distance themselves from me so that they could keep the peace with this terrifying, terrifying German woman. So yeah, I'm not saying that was the reason I changed jobs eventually, but it was on the list. Was on the list. Yes, I don't know why people have to be like that. I Am German Expat also was on the show. It's Fadi, who was in the episode. I'll link it in the show notes. He asked, do you like fudge? I don't know what the context of that is. Fudge is, I guess, it's like a candy that you make from butter and sugar and milk. It's basically just butter and sugar and milk. And it's not very well known in Germany. So when you asked me this, I realized, yes, I do, and I do miss it. So I don't know if that was the point of your question, but yes, I do like fudge, and I do miss it here in Germany. The Expat Cast. So now we get on to my rival podcaster, The Expat Cast. And she asked me a few questions. We've already had one of hers that she asked me about German sports. This is the first one that she asked me. What was the most ridiculous thing a German bystander scolded you for not doing? And now this is something that I think I've mentioned on the podcast before. I've told this story before, but essentially one winter, I think 2 years or 3 years ago, I ran out of wood. So we order wood. We have a masonry oven in our house, and we fired up with wood, and I hadn't judged how much wood we needed for the winter. So we ran out. I ordered more, but there was like a 2-week period where we didn't have wood for the fire. So I went to a nearby hardware store. Now, I don't normally do that. It is expensive. I know. So I was at this hardware store, and I was loading on a few bags that I thought I would need for 2 weeks. This guy came into the hardware store, and I remember seeing him, and he just stopped and stared at me like he was surprised, to the point where I was actually looking behind me to see, like, is he looking at me? Is it me? And then I carried on stacking the wood, and he started coming over to me, made his way over to me. He went out of his way, essentially, to come and tell me that it was ridiculous that I was buying wood from one of these hardware stores because you could get it much cheaper and much better quality wood at any of the suppliers around the region. But the last thing I should be doing was buying wood from the hardware store. I'm like, I know. Like, you don't know anything about me. You have no, maybe I'm not buying the wood for myself. Maybe, I don't know, I'm doing it as a favor for someone. But even with all of that, like, sure, it's good points that he made. You could get wood. It wasn't like he was saying, hey, you could get better wood. He was outraged. He was damn near pissed off that I was buying wood in this hardware store. So I don't know, like, that's the kind of thing that happens in Germany from time to time. I'm not saying all Germans are like that, but Germans they would sometimes go out of their way to tell you that you're doing something that they feel is stupid. So yeah, that answers that question. The Expat Cast's next question was, what is your favorite expat podcast other than your own? And why is it the Expat Cast? So I do like the Expat Cast, despite the fact that she's my rival. I think, what is it that they say? Like, know your enemy and stuff. But the truth is, I don't really listen to expat podcasts that much anymore because I just don't have the time. I used to listen to a lot of podcasts when I was driving to work every day. I have a 40-kilometer commute one way, so I would be spending about an hour and a half a day in the car, which is a lot of time to catch up on podcasts. I don't have that time anymore because I'm working from home. And also working on my own podcast is very time intensive as well. It doesn't leave me with much time for podcast listening in the evenings, for example. So I don't listen to many podcasts anymore. It's not just expat podcasts, it's just a podcast in general. But I will say, Nicole, from the Expat Cast, if I do have a bit of time and I am going to listen to an expat podcast, the expat cast is the one that I would put into my listening queue. So there you go. So we're back to Alyssa.savs. I got some more questions from her. You remember she asked me a few ones earlier, but here's another one from her. How can someone who lives internationally get involved in German culture? Which I think is a great question. I assume that Alyssa lives internationally. It depends what you mean by involved, I guess. I guess one of the ways is you could read German newspapers online or follow things like the Tagesschau. Depends how good your German is. dw.com is a very good news site that also gives the news in English. That's a very good one to follow, that'll keep you up to date with the latest things that are happening in culture, in the news, current affairs, and so on. You could also watch the latest German movies and TV shows, because there you can hear how people are talking these days, what kind of dialogue there is, and so on. And I guess places like the Goethe Institute, they do a lot with cultural stuff, and they even have a culture section on their website that you could check out. It's things like book reviews and discussions and blogs about cultural things in Germany. And also, wherever you are internationally, the Germans love their Vereins. So there's a good chance that some Germans have started some kind of German club near you. So see if you can find that. Another one that she asked, if you could export one German cultural aspect to the rest of the world, what would it be? Well, I honestly like the directness aspect of Germans. When I visit South Africa, I definitely notice that people don't tell me exactly what they're thinking or what they're wanting. And I guess it's due to politeness or just the way the culture is. And I definitely notice it also when I'm dealing with people from the United States of America and England and Britain and so on. So I guess the German approach of little bullshit and not being afraid to be honest does have its advantages. If I did export that to the rest of the world, I might just tone it down a little. It's great to be direct, Germans, but maybe we're going to just tone it down if we make it a world export, because it might just be a little on the harsh side. Another one from Alyssa. What is your favorite hidden gem about Germany? Food, place, culture, music, or clothes? Well, one of the things I realized the other night when I went out for dinner was the little villages and towns that are just off the tourist path is some of my favorite places in Germany, because you can really get a taste for the real culture of whichever Germany region you're in from those little villages, because they're not touristy and they're very charming. The architecture is always really nice, and the food is very traditional. You can get a lot of good food. You can also get things like there's always Italian places wherever you go. So that's great from that perspective. And these little towns can also be charming from the perspective of, unlike in bigger cities, which were all bombed, when you see a building in one of these smaller villages or towns, you know that it probably wasn't bombed during the World War, and it's probably had some restoration work done on it, but it wasn't rebuilt completely like in many of the cities. They rebuilt a lot of the monuments and the buildings around there. So it's also from that perspective, it's quite nice. And yeah, even after 14 years of living in Germany, I said this on an Instagram post that I posted the other day, I still don't get tired of ending up in those little villages. All right, so here's one more from Alyssa. Have you run into roadblocks with dialects? Yeah, I live in Franconia, which in itself, there's Upper Franconia, Middle Franconia, Lower Franconia. So those all have different dialects. And even inside those separate regions, there's dozens of dialects as well. So you run into them where I live on a fairly regular basis. And the roadblocks are everywhere. I mean, in the early days, my basic Hochdeutsch wasn't good. So I had to deal with our landlord, for example, who could only speak a lower Franconian dialect. And our conversations back then were mostly just him rattling off, me nodding and smiling, and then a few days later, some people would show up at the apartment to do some or other work that I had no idea about. It was just like that whole rental experience for me was just me not understanding what was going on with our rental contract, with anything basically around that. But of course, I've gotten better with understanding the Franconian dialect since I've been living here for 14 years now. And especially in the village where I am, you start developing an ear for it. But every now and then, when you run into someone with a really strong dialect, I still run into those roadblocks, as you put it, Elisa. There's still times where I don't know what's going on, and especially on the phone. If I'm dealing with someone on the phone who's speaking a strong dialect, I don't have any chance to understand that. So yeah, the dialects cause a problem, and a lot of people can speak Hochdeutsch, but even when they do, a lot of the time that Hochdeutsch is really just a very accented Hochdeutsch. So they still have that strong dialect accent and still makes it quite difficult to understand what's going on. So yeah. Someone named Beagle Van Life asked, what is the worst place to live and avoid in Munich? So I have no idea. I don't live in Munich. I've only been there a few times on a break, so I can't answer that question. But there are many sites and blogs that can help you. And the first one that comes to mind actually is City Starlings on Instagram. So search for City Starlings. I'll put the link in the show notes as well. And also another one that comes to mind is Bored in Munich, also on Instagram. There's many others that I'm not thinking of right now. So just put in Munich in a search in Instagram or search for it on the web. And there's lots of blogs which can help you with exactly that kind of stuff. And if they don't have an article about it, mail them. They're all nice people, and get in touch with them and ask them your questions. So yeah. The Adventures of Steffi, who was on the show a few months ago, had 2 questions, I think it was. Yeah, she had one question. We've already answered one of her other questions. The Adventures of Steffi asks, what's the most positive experience you've had in Germany? Well, the thing is, there are many, many positive experiences that I've had in Germany, because obviously I wouldn't have been here for 14 years if there wasn't something positive about it. So for me, my experience here in Germany has been mostly positive, but I think one of the big ones for me personally has to be has to do with my son. As you might know, if you've listened to the podcast for a long time, you might know that my eldest son has special needs. And he has pretty severe developmental delays in just about everything, from physical through to mental, due to a genetic defect that he had. And my experience here of how German culture provides for these kids has been incredible. Nothing short of incredible. There is all kinds of help that we get for our son, because yeah, there's a lot of things in place to help families with children like these. So it's things like help from the state or from health insurance, and everything from funds through to free babysitters and free cleaners. The kind of strain that a family with a special needs child experiences it's massive. The strain is massive. Every day is a stress, and any help that you can get, any help that families can get with this kind of thing is amazing. And Germany offers a lot of help in this regard. So to me, the mindset that Germany has of helping people who need the help has been immensely positive experience for me. And it also creates a feeling of inclusion. It's something that I love about Germany as well, is there is a feeling of inclusion in Germany, an attempt to include and integrate people from all walks of life and all different backgrounds. So I think that's pretty much the most positive feeling that I've gotten from Germany. Lisa Jans, job coach. Also, she's been a previous guest, and I can tell you she's going to be coming up on the podcast in November talking about job interviews in Germany. Lisa Jans asks, do you have a favorite book that helped you adjust here in Germany? Not language necessarily. So to answer that question, not directly, but I found that learning the history of Germany really helped me make connections with the country pretty early on. And one of my favorite books is this one. It's called The Berlin Wall by Frederick Taylor. And it's such a comprehensive story of the time between 1961 and 1989. I read it before I moved to Germany, when I knew that I was coming to Germany. And then I read it once as well later on in Germany, just before a Berlin trip, actually. And this really made my time in Berlin amazing, because I just read the history of what had happened with the Berlin Wall, with the Cold War. And like I said, it's a really comprehensive explanation. Another book that I loved was called The German Genius by Peter Watson. And that one explains the impact of German innovation and inventions and culture on the rest of the world. And that was a very, very interesting book to read. So it's books like that that help me understand more about German history that also kind of gave me more of a connection to Germany as well, because I felt like I could understand the context of some things a bit better. And yeah, so I guess that's an indirect answer to Lisa's question. Books about the history of Germany, essentially. Lisa actually also asked another question. What do you like the most about your podcast? The biggest thing that I like about my podcast, to answer your question, Lisa, is the community, the feeling of community that I get from it. I would never have met people, for example, my rival, but I would have never met Nicole from the Expat Cast, just as one example. And I've also spoken to all kinds of people living in Germany. So a former Schlager singer, for example, and I've spoken to musicians and writers and YouTubers and other podcasters, struggling artists. They're like across the board. And these people have inspired me so much. That's been one of the advantages of my podcast. Also, just having someone to speak to during lockdown, that helped me. My podcast definitely helped me during lockdown, because on a regular basis, when we were just locked down, I still had access to all these amazing people, doing interviews with them, getting to know them. And of course, the best thing about this is many of the guests occasionally become friends, or we chat regularly. So without the podcast, I would have never had the chance to meet them. And of course, I think also one of the biggest things that I like about my podcast is when I get people telling me that the podcast helped them in some way, either when they were preparing for a move to Germany, or when they were here and they realized that they weren't the only ones that had these experiences. That means a lot as well in the greater scheme of things, because I feel like there's really some kind of reason that I'm doing this podcast. So the last question that we'll cover in this Q&A episode is asked by Elmans and Sunset. And they asked, if you could change one thing about Germany or Germans, what would it be? It's a trap. Are you German, Elmans and Sunset? I think the one thing that I would probably change is to try and get the Germans to analyze things just a little less. Because, as an example, I would just like to sometimes make a throwaway comment that I didn't necessarily mean anything by. Just make a throwaway comment and not have it analyzed to within an inch of its life, basically. So having said that, Germany's definitely made me more of an analytical person over time. But still, I sometimes do feel that one thing I wish Germans could do is just switch this little part of their brain off that makes them analyze everything so much. And of course, this is all a sweeping generalization. It doesn't hold true for every single German you meet, but a lot of Germans have this way of analyzing everything all the time. So that is probably one thing I would maybe change somewhat. So that is it for the questions. I will be doing another one of these Q&A episodes in a few months' time. So feel free at any time to send me your questions to info@thegermanyexperience.de, or just get hold of me on Instagram, the.germany.experience. And let me know. Let me know your questions and I'll collect them for next time, or even just answer them directly to you in a mail. Like, I could do that as well. Thank you so much to everyone who asked questions. Apologies if I didn't get to your question. And yeah, thanks for listening. I'll speak to you next week. Auf Wiederhören.